Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Melody Barnes, Larry Summers, Christina Romer, Peter Orszag, Seth Harris, and Vice President Joe Biden.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Seth Harris. I'm the Deputy Secretary of Labor. Mr. Vice President, let me begin by thanking you for your outstanding leadership of the Middle Class Task Force. Secretary Solis and her staff at the Labor Department are proud of our contributions to this essential work of expanding and strengthening America's middle class. Retirement security is fundamental to that effort. Along with Social Security and personal savings, workers need secure pensions if they're to remain in the middle class when their working days are done. A secure pension system is also essential to the long-term health of our economy. Whether it's in 401ks, private sector defined pension plans, individual retirement accounts, or public sector pension plans, workers' pension monies create tremendous pools of investment capital that create jobs and expand our economy. But pension money must be invested wisely if it's going to serve both of these purposes, that is, retirees who have middle-class incomes and continuing job creation and economic growth. Mr. Vice President, at the Labor Department, we think workers will make good decisions about their pensions if they get good information. So today, in partnership with the Middle Class Task Force, I'm delighted to announce the publication of 2 new rules that will strengthen America's pension system by assuring that workers get the good information they need. The first rule would make certain that workers get unbiased advice about how to invest the money in their IRAs and 401ks. Workers manage these pensions themselves, so expert advice can be helpful, but that advice must be unbiased. And there must be no risk that the advisor will benefit from steering workers to particular investments. If this rule is finally adopted, investment advisors wouldn't be able to make extra money if workers choose an investment in which the advisor has a financial interest, so we'll avoid conflicts of interest. Investment advisors would also be required to disclose their fees, and computer models used to offer investment advice would have to be certified as objective and unbiased. We project that 2 million workers in defined contribution pension plans and 13 million IRA holders would benefit from this rule to the tune of $6 billion. But it's a proposed rule, so we invite everyone to go to the Labor Department's website to learn more and offer their views. The second rule will increase transparency at multi-employer plans, that is, pension plans collectively bargained by unions and groups of employers. There are 13.5 million workers enrolled in multi-employer plans. This rule will require that if any of these workers or their unions ask for information about the health of the plans, the plan administrator must provide that information. Very simply, this rule assures that workers and their unions can monitor the financial condition and the day-to-day operations of their retirement investments. Mr. Vice President, I know regulations aren't the sexiest topic of conversation. And Secretary Solis and I don't have any illusions about the difficulties facing America's workers, particularly in the midst of these tough economic times. It'll take time, hard work, and perseverance for workers to rebuild their retirement savings. But the 2 rules the Middle Class Task Force and the Labor Department are announcing today will make a real difference in the lives of working and retired Americans. And that's why the President created the Middle Class Task Force and asked Vice President Biden to chair it. The Labor Department stands ready, Mr. Vice President, to continue our work with you, the Middle Class Task Force, and the President to strengthen and expand our middle class and to assure retirement security for all. We look forward to the challenge. And now I'm delighted to introduce Peter Orszag, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget.
Thank you, Seth, and thank you all for being here today. The Middle Class Task Force was formed a little more than a year ago at the height of the most severe economic recession our economy has experienced since the Great Depression. A year ago, real GDP was falling at the fastest rate in a quarter century. we were losing an average of 700,000 jobs each month, equivalent to the entire population of the state of Vermont. The capital and credit markets were virtually frozen. Economists of all stripes feared that our economy would sink into a depression. That didn't happen, in no small part because the administration acted quickly and strongly to get lending flowing again, stabilize the housing market, and jumpstart economic activity by passing the Recovery Act. The Recovery Act is working. It's a key reason that we have moved from the economy falling by almost 6% at the end of 2008 to increasing by almost 6% at the end of 2009. It's funding critical infrastructure projects all across the nation, and let me note this, it's doing so in a way that is not only transparent, but at least thus far, with a remarkable lack of fraud and abuse, and I attribute that in no small part to the efforts from our Vice President, Sheriff Joe, in making sure that mayors, governors, and others are treating this seriously and doing so in a responsible manner. There's much more work to be done to bolster the jobs market, and much still more work to be done to reverse the declines that middle-class families have experienced not just this past year, but over the past several decades. From 1979 to 2008, real median family income grew at an annual rate of 0.4% a year, while productivity growth grew by 2% a year. Middle-class families are not keeping pace. One of the results is that those at the top, the families in the top 1% of the income distribution, accounted for 23% of total income in 2007, the highest level of income concentration since 1928. Family incomes are not rising, yet in more and more families, both husband and wife are working. Female labor force participation rates have risen significantly, reaching almost 60% in 2007, relative to roughly 40% in the 1960s. And between 1979 and 2006, working wives and middle-income families worked an average of 500 hours a year more. That's roughly 3 months a year more than previously. At the same time, healthcare costs and tuition costs are rising rapidly, putting increased pressure on middle-class families. A strong America must be built on a strong middle class, which is why the work of this task force is so important and why we included in this year's budget some key initiatives developed by the task force: a child care tax credit, help for families caring for elderly and disabled relatives, loan forgiveness for college students, and ways to promote retirement savings. One reason that the Middle Class Task Force has been so effective in developing these and other proposals is the man leading it. It's my distinct honor to introduce a champion in the middle class, someone I think a lot of us call a friend, the Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Thanks, Pete. Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. And I realize there's a number of leaders in the audience who, by their leadership of union movements, by their leadership of a whole range of organizations that are out here, are the champions of the middle class. Folks, this is a bit unusual. The President of the United States, the first official announcement, I think was the first official announcement he made, other than after personnel were named for the cabinet and the administration, very, very early on, was that he was going to set up this thing called the Middle Class Task Force. And I think when it happened, a lot of people wondered, well, okay, is this sort of a gimmick? Administrations come along and set up special envoys and special task force and special focus. But the truth of the matter is, Barack and I, the President and I, met what we said during the campaign. That we'll ultimately measure the success of our efforts as President and Vice President at the end of the day, not merely on whether or not the GDP is growing at 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever percentage it may grow, and it's going to grow closer to 4 to 6, hopefully before the time we're finished. But the fact of the matter is that that's not enough. The question we're going to determine whether we succeed or not, our judgment about ourselves, is whether or not middle-class folks sitting around their kitchen tables after we've been out of office actually look at one another and feel more secure being able to stay at that table in that neighborhood, be able to send their kid to school, be able to have a living standard that they work so hard to get.